Okay, so today we're going to talk about finding the volume of a cylinder and a cone. So let's review a little bit of information from 7th grade. So as you remember, the area of a circle is just pi r square. Now, if you notice, r is represented by the letter R. R represents the radius, which basically means the length from the center to the edge of a circle. So a picture of the radius will be from the center to the edge, and that's known as the radius, so R. Now the diameter is represented by the letter D, and that's the length from one edge to the other in a circle. So a picture of this will be from one side to the other side. That's known as the diameter. And as you can tell, it takes two radii to create one diameter. So if they give you the diameter and you need to find the radius, all you have to do is divide by 2 or cut it in half. Okay? So now let's go ahead and move on to the volume. Now the volume of a cylinder, the formula is pi r squared times the height. Now as you notice, pi r squared is just basically the area of a circle, but we also multiply the height because basically a cylinder is just a can, and it's basically a whole bunch of circles being overlapped by itself until it reaches the necessary height of that cylinder. So that's why we do the area of a circle times the height. Now for those who don't remember what volume is basically the total amount of space within a 3D shape. So in other words, it's basically if I were to pour water into this container, how much water could fit in the container, how much liquid. So that's basically what volume is. Now you need to remember that cylinder is a can. It's just basically a soda can, and the formula is pi r squared times the height. So first thing I need to do on this problem, example 1, which states what is the volume of a cylinder, I need to identify which one's the radius and which one's the height. Okay? And if you remember, the radius is r, the height will be represented by h. So as you can tell, the easiest one, the height. The height is 32. The radius is going to be from the center to the edge, which is 2. So the radius is 2. Okay? Now, what I'm going to do with those 2 points is, what I'm going to do with those 2 points is I'm going to plug them into my formula. So pi times r squared times the height. And by the way, this is not a 12. It's not a 2. It's supposed to be a 12. So anyways, I'm going to go ahead and plug it in. So the pi stays the same times the r. The r we said was 12. Don't forget your square. Times the height, which is 32. So basically, what I did was, instead of the r, I put 12 in its place. Instead of the h, I put 32. Okay? So now, all I have to do is type it in my calculator to let the calculator do all the hard work. And yes, you will have your calculator on problems like this on the EOG. So first thing I need to do is put down the pi. So to be able to do pi, you will do second, and then this button right below the clear button. As you can tell, pi is right there. Then click times 12, and then x squared will give you the exponent. So this button right here will give you x squared. So it will give you that little square that we need. And then we need to do times 32. You click enter, and there's the volume. And now, of course, I will recommend that you always round to the second decimal place. So this 8 is going to turn this 5 into a 6. So my final answer is going to be 14,476.46. And that's the volume of that cylinder. Now let's move on to the next problem. Now, as you can tell, I need to identify what the radius is and what the height is of this cylinder. So the height obviously is 10. The radius is going to be half of this distance because this is the diameter, okay? This is known as the diameter. So to be able to find the radius, I need to cut this in half. So half of 12 is 6. So that means my radius is 6. So when I plug it into my formula, pi r squared times the height, I'm going to do pi times 6 squared times 10. Because if you remember, the r is represented by 6, and now the h is represented by 10. So when I type that into my calculator, I get 1130.97. Okay, and of course I didn't have to round anything because there's nothing to round. Okay, let's move on. Now it says example 3. Katie baked a circular cake with a diameter of 9 inches and a height of 5 inches. What is the approximate volume of the cake? Well, they told you it's circular, so that means it's a cylinder. So we know that the diameter is 9 inches, so that means the radius has to be 4.5 because half of 9 is 4.5. So I'm going to mark this out because I already used it. I used the 9 to be able to figure out the radius, so after that I really don't need to do anything else. And the height is 5 inches. So that means with my formula, I'm going to do pi times r squared times the height, because this is a cylinder. So pi times the radius, which is 4.5 squared, times the height, which is 5. That will give me my final answer. So I'm going to type that into my calculator. And when you do that, you get 3.18.09 after you round. And that's the volume of this cake. Okay, now moving on. Now the volume of a cone is pi times r cubed, or pi r squared, times the height divided by 3. Okay, so if you notice, the top part is basically the volume of a cylinder divided by 3, as you can tell. And that's basically true because if you were to take a cylinder, for example this one, and I were to divide it into 3 parts, I could divide this cylinder into 3 cones. So basically, if I have the volume of a cylinder and I divide by 3, it gives me the volume of 1 cone. Okay? So if you notice, here's your 3 cylinders. Okay? Now you must say, Mr. Gomez, well, the 2 on the sides are a lot smaller than the one in the middle. Yeah, technically they look smaller, and it's because of how the picture is being shown. But if you were to actually take 3 containers or 3 cone containers that had water, and you were pour them into 1 cylinder, it would take 3 cones of liquid to be able to fill up 1 cylinder with the same measurements, with the same height and the same diameter. So with that being said, anytime you need to find the volume of a cone, all you have to do is take your height and your radius and plug it in just like you would with a cylinder, and then divide by 3. Okay? So let's do an example. So example 1. Find the volume of the cone. So the radius and the height is the information I need to identify. So the height is 10. The radius is 6. So just like before, I'm going to do pi times r squared times the height. And then I'm going to divide by 3. So basically, I'm doing pi times 6 squared times 10, and then divide by 3. That's the very important part. Because if you forget to divide by 3, all you're doing is just finding the volume of a cylinder. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to do second pi times 6 squared times 10, and then I'm going to click enter, and this tells you the volume of one cylinder. I need the volume of a cone, so I'm going to divide by 3. Dividing by 3 will now give me the volume of one cone. So 376.99 is my answer to this cone. So that's the volume of this cone. And yes, you could round to 377 if you really wanted to. Okay? Now let's do example 2. What is the volume of this cone? Well, two things I need to find, the radius and the height. Well, obviously, the height is 7, and the radius has to be 5, because half of 10 is 5. So I'm going to do pi times r squared times the height divided by 3. So I'm going to do pi times 5 times 7, and don't forget your square, divided by 3. So I'm doing second pi times 5 squared times 7, click enter, divided by 3. And the volume for that cone is 183.26. Okay? And the last example. Now, all the examples or all the problems you're going to have on the test and on the EOG are going to just look like that. And if you notice, all of your answer choices are completely different. They're very far apart from each other. So it's not going to matter if you decide to use either pi or if you decide to use 3.14. Either or will still give you the right answer. Okay? So now, if you look at problem number 3, road construction crews have to fill traffic cones with sand in order to keep them in place. If the average traffic cone is 12 inches in diameter and 36 inches tall, how much sand can be put inside the cone? Well, the diameter is 12, so that means the radius is 6. I'm going to mark out this 12 now because I don't need it. And then the 36 is how tall it is, so the height. So when I do this, I'm going to do pi times 6 squared times 36 divided by 3. So if you do that, second pi times 6 squared times 36 divided by 3 will result in 1357, which, as you can tell, is answer choice C. Okay? Now, if you have any further questions, please do not hesitate to ask me in class the next day.